I still remember the sound of the glasses clinking like a hammer, driving nails into my chest. We were seated under the chandeliers of a Manhattan ballroom, golden light, spilling across white tablecloths and polished silver. My younger sibling, Alexis, had just graduated with a master's degree in business administration. The family gathered to celebrate aunts and uncles, flown-in cousins dressed in gowns and suits they could hardly afford. I had brought a simple gift, an engraved pen, thinking this was Alexis's night. But it became mine in the worst possible way. Alexis stood up with a flute of champagne in hand, the whole table leaning in for a speech. At first it sounded like the usual thank yous, professors, classmates, mentors. Then Alexis's eyes locked on me. The smile that spread across their face was cold rehearsed. "Avery Alexis," said voice carrying easily across the room, "if you really care about family, you'll sell your $1 million apartment and help pay my debts. That is what family does." Laughter rippled down the table, nervous at first, then genuine. The words cut through me sharper than any knife. Alexis tapped the black folder on the table inside. Were printed loan documents with my name circled in red ink, proof of what they owed. It was a performance staged for maximum humiliation. For a moment I sat frozen, my hand gripping the stem of my glass. My mouth was dry. Everyone's eyes had shifted from Alexis to me, waiting for my reaction. I could see my mother nodding approvingly, my father smirking as if this demand were reasonable. I felt the 4 stages all at once. First came shock like ice water down my spine. Then came loneliness, the realization that not one person at that table would come to my defense. Then the forced smile, the mask I had to wear so I would not break down in front of them. And beneath it all, a rising fury, trapped but alive, coiled in my chest. The party went on as if nothing had happened. Plates clattered, waiters poured wine, cousins leaned over to snap photos for their social feeds. To them, my silence was weakness. To me, it was the only shield I had left. I remember staring at that black folder. The edge was frayed, as if Alexis had carried it everywhere, rehearsing this scene until the moment was perfect. The paper inside was heavy, notarized, legitimate. They had planned this humiliation with precision. But I kept my voice steady. I raised my glass, nodded slightly, and said nothing. A simple smile, no more. It was the only way to keep the tears from spilling over. Later, I heard the clinking again, echoing in my mind. That night was not just a party, it was a declaration of war. And I promise you, war was what they got. But I'll explain in a moment. Tell me where you are watching from and hit subscribe, because what happened next will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about family and loyalty. I left the ballroom that night with my face calm, but my chest burning. The city lights outside looked blurred, not from the drizzle in the air, but from the rage pressing behind my eyes. I told myself to breathe, to keep walking, to make it back to my apartment without collapsing. The moment I closed the door behind me, I dropped my coat on the floor and went straight to my laptop. My hands shook as I logged into my bank account. I had to see it with my own eyes. The numbers loaded slowly, the blue bar spinning, as if mocking me. When the page finally appeared, my heart sank. Where there should have been nearly $200,000 in savings, there was almost nothing. A balance of $12 glared at me from the screen. $12. That black folder Alexis had waved around wasn't just for show. The money was gone. I scrolled through the transactions, line after line of transfers that I had never approved. Joint accounts, shared access. Somewhere years ago, when the family still pretended to trust me, I had signed a document for emergency access. They had turned my good faith into their weapon. I leaned back in my chair, the city humming outside, and laughed once hollow, bitter. My parents' words at the party came back. Family helps family. No, in their world, family drained family. The betrayal didn't stop with money. By morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Cousins had posted clips from the toast on TikTok, captioned in bright letters, "Family first, unless you're Avery." The video spread fast, strangers leaving comments, some mocking, others piling on with jokes. Within hours, the clip had more than 100,000 views. My humiliation was now public property. I tried calling my mother. She answered on the second ring, her tone already sharp. "You embarrassed us last night," she said. "You just sat there smug and silent. You could have fixed everything with one word." "One word?" I asked. "You mean yes?" "You live in a $1 million apartment while your sister drowns," she snapped. "Do you think that's fair? You owe us." I hung up before I said something unforgivable. But the words stayed with me. You owe us. Later that week, Alexis posted a new Instagram story. A designer shopping bag swung from their wrist. The caption read, "Hard work pays off." The comments were full of heart emojis, fire emojis, congratulations from friends. Nobody knew the truth that the hard work was mine and the payoff had been stolen. By then, friends I once trusted started to choose sides. A colleague at the office pulled me aside, whispering, "People are saying you're obsessive about money. Maybe you should just let it go." Let it go. Easy advice when it wasn't their future burned to ashes. But even in that fog of betrayal, one message stood out. An email arrived from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simple: "You need to see this." Inside was a single attachment, bank documents clearly scanned, showing Alexis and their partner moving funds through a joint account with my name on it. The proof I hadn't even dared to hope for. Whoever sent it wanted me to fight. I stared at the screen for a long time. The anger that had been boiling inside finally took shape. Betrayal had a face, a name, a trail of evidence. My humiliation had been public, but so would be my revenge. Still, I wasn't ready for what came next. Because betrayal was only the beginning. I knew I couldn't stay silent forever. Silence had been my only defense in that ballroom, but silence now would make me complicit. My parents' words kept echoing. "You owe us." That phrase turned over and over in my head, as though it were scripture written by hands that had never paid a bill of mine, never saved a dime for my future. I drove up to my parents' house one Sunday afternoon, a place that had once been warm, but now felt like enemy ground. The front porch sagged under flower pots, the paint peeling from shutters that hadn't been touched in years. They opened the door with smiles that looked more like smirks. My mother waved me inside, her voice, "Sweet, too sweet." "You finally decided to come home," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Not home," I answered flatly. "Just the house." We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I had once done schoolwork while they argued about bills. The wood was scarred with years of use, but now it felt like a stage. My father leaned forward, his knuckles pressing into the surface. "You've been selfish, Avery," he said. "You live in that apartment like a king while your sister struggles. What does family mean to you?" "Family means not stealing from each other," I said, sliding the printed bank statements across the table. $200,000 doesn't just disappear. Alexis drained it. You knew. They didn't look shocked. They didn't even bother denying it. My mother's lips curled into something that might have been pity or disdain. "You're too obsessed with money," she said softly, like she was explaining a lesson I had failed to learn. "Money comes and goes, but family is forever." I laughed, once a dry sound. "Forever until you need a scapegoat, until you need an account to bleed dry." Their silence told me everything I needed to know. When I left that house, I knew something had broken permanently. Whatever thread tied us together had been cut with dull scissors, ragged, irreversible. That night, Alexis doubled down. A new Instagram post appeared, a photo of champagne flutes raised against city lights. The caption read, "Celebrating new beginnings. Sometimes love, sometimes money, sometimes both." The comments filled with admiration, friends calling them an inspiration. My name wasn't mentioned, but I didn't need it to be. Everyone knew the implication. I scrolled through the feed bile rising in my throat, but then came the email. From the same anonymous address as before. This time, not just one document, but a folder of attachments scanned leases, receipts, and transfers. It was undeniable proof that Alexis and their partner had been using my joint account to cover rent, vacations, and luxury items, all while letting me believe the savings were untouched. One receipt stopped me cold. A hotel booking in Miami dated only days after the graduation party under my name. They hadn't just stolen money, they had stolen my identity to build their perfect lie. I stared at the screen until the room blurred. Whoever had sent these files wanted me armed, and I was. But the strangest part was the final attachment, a screenshot of a group chat my family without me. The messages rolled by. "Mom, Avery will cave. Always does. Dad, they're too weak to fight. Just push harder. Alexis, once we get the apartment, it's done." The words stabbed deeper than the loss of money. This wasn't desperation, it was conspiracy. They weren't saving Alexis, they were planning to strip me bare down to the last brick of my home. I closed my laptop slowly, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. Isolation had been forced upon me, but now it gave me clarity. I had no allies in that family. The anonymous sender was the only ghost of support, and even that I couldn't trust. But the decision was mine now. To stay silent was to die by inches. To fight meant stepping into war. And war, I realized, was already at my doorstep. The first sign came on a Wednesday evening. I had just returned from work, loosened my tie, and set a kettle to boil. My apartment had always been my refuge, perched high above the noise of the city, its walls lined with books and the quiet hum of machines I trusted. But that evening something felt off. The doorframe bore a faint scratch that hadn't been there before. I brushed it off as coincidence. But when I stepped inside, I saw it. The Persian rug in the hallway was shifted, the edge curled as though dragged by careless shoes. My chest tightened. I walked further in. The scent of my lavender candles had been replaced by something harsher, cheap perfume, the kind Alexis always wore. I moved room to room, each detail cutting deeper. The drawers in my study half open, papers shuffled out of order. And then in the living room, my folder of deeds and contracts spread across the coffee table like a hand of cards thrown down in triumph. I pulled out my phone, opened the security app. My cameras had caught everything. There they were, my family walking in with the confidence of owners, my father carrying a crowbar to wedge the lock, my mother leading the way, her purse swinging as if she were strolling through a market. Alexis behind them laughing as they flipped through my documents. On the recording, I heard my mother's voice clear as crystal. "You don't deserve this place. It belongs to us." They rummaged through my belongings like scavengers, lifting framed photographs, tossing aside receipts, even uncorking my wine as if they had every right. Alexis strutted into my bedroom, flopped down on the bed, and shouted, "Feels good already, soon it'll be mine." The kettle on my counter whistled, pulling me back to the present. My hands shook as I turned off the flame. Betrayal was no longer abstract. It was physical, invasive. They hadn't just drained my bank account. They had invaded the one sanctuary I had left. I sat down on the couch, opened the footage again, and watched it all the way through. Each laugh, each sneer. At one point, my father picked up a photograph of me at my college graduation, stared at it, then tossed it face down on the floor. My mother nodded, saying, "He'll give up once he sees we can take anything we want." I couldn't breathe. My chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. This was no longer family. This was a heist carried out under the guise of blood. Later that night, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment. My phone buzzed. A message from Alexis. "Nice place. Would be a shame if you lost it. Sign it over and we'll leave you in peace." The arrogance of those words nearly made me laugh. They thought they had broken me. They thought fear would make me fold. Instead, something inside me hardened. The humiliation that had soaked me for weeks now burned away, leaving only resolve. I copied every video file, every screenshot, every shred of evidence onto a drive. I slipped it into an envelope, sealed it, and wrote one name across the front. Eleanor White, attorney at law, a woman I knew for her work dismantling fraudulent estate claims in Manhattan. I sat in silence after the city outside, glittering through the window. They had wanted to shame me, to strip me. What they didn't realize was that humiliation can be fuel, betrayal can be blueprint. As I turned off the lights and prepared for bed, I whispered to myself, not as a promise but as a vow, "You stole my savings, my dignity, my peace. But you forgot the cameras, you forgot the law, and you will pay." The footage ended with Alexis waving my apartment key stolen years ago in front of the camera like a trophy. They winked, not knowing the lens recorded it all. That wink sealed their fate. The next morning, I walked into the law office on Park Avenue with the envelope tucked under my arm. Eleanor White's name was etched in gold on the glass door. Her reputation stretched across the city, whispered in boardrooms and courtrooms alike. She was known for dismantling greedy families who clawed at inheritances and estates they had no claim to. If anyone could understand my story, it was her. She didn't offer the fake smiles most lawyers give. She simply gestured for me to sit, adjusted her glasses, and opened the envelope. One by one, she slid the photographs in USB drive across the polished wood of her desk. "This is your family," she asked, though the disgust in her voice made it sound rhetorical. I nodded. They drained nearly $200,000 from a joint savings account, and now they want my apartment. Eleanor leaned back, tapping the folder with her pen. "They left you a gift, Avery. Do you know what this is worth?" To me, nothing but humiliation. To a judge, she allowed herself the smallest of smiles. It's everything. That afternoon, she drafted the formal demand letter. Crisp, cold, surgical. It listed every transfer, every forged signature, every intrusion captured on camera. At the bottom, it demanded restitution for the full amount within 10 business days, or else we would proceed with a lawsuit for conversion, unjust enrichment, and trespass. The letter went out by certified mail to every member of my family. The silence lasted exactly 48 hours. Then my phone rang. Alexis's name flashed across the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. "You're pathetic," Alexis screamed, voice raw with fury. "You're really suing us, over some bricks and cash. After everything, you're dragging your own family through court." I let the rant roll on, counting breaths. When the noise quieted, I spoke calmly. "You stole $200,000 from me. You broke into my home. You waved my key at my camera as if it were a joke. This isn't about bricks or cash. This is about my life." Alexis tried to laugh, but it cracked. "No jury will side with you. Family matters are private." "Not when the evidence is this public," I said, my voice flat. "The cameras saw everything. The bank records tell the story. The law will decide." For a moment, silence. Then the line went dead. 2 days later, the fight went public. I woke to messages from colleagues and friends, all forwarding me the same image. A scan of Eleanor's letter leaked online. Someone had uploaded it to Twitter. The caption read, "$1 million family feud. Brother versus sister. Who deserves the fortune?" By noon, the hashtag number $1 million heist was trending. Strangers debated my life as if it were a television drama. Some mocked me, others cheered, but the tide was clear. The world had chosen sides. Screenshots of Alexis in designer boutiques, sipping champagne flashing, borrowed wealth, flooded the timeline. People pieced it together. My savings had built their illusion. Friends who had once avoided me now texted apologies. Colleagues whispered in hallways, not with pity but with respect. For the first time in months, the shame was no longer mine. That evening, Alexis sent another message. Not an insult this time, but a warning. "You think the internet will save you. Wait until court. You'll regret this." I stared at the words, then set the phone down. The irony was almost laughable. They had already lost, and they didn't even see it. Revenge wasn't just beginning, it was blooming unstoppable. And the best part, I hadn't even raised my voice yet. It began with a trickle, 1 or 2 retweets, a few comments here and there. But by the end of that first week, my family name was everywhere. Number $1 million heist, spread beyond Twitter. It bled into TikTok, Instagram, even late-night talk shows, where comedians cracked jokes at Alexis's expense. Clips of my sibling parading through boutiques, flashing luxury bags, sipping champagne, they resurfaced like ghosts, waiting for their cue. Strangers stitched those videos with screenshots of Eleanor's demand letter, the words "unjust enrichment" highlighted in yellow. The internet had become my courtroom, and the jury was global. I never posted a word myself. I didn't have to. The evidence spoke louder than anything I could say. A video of Alexis clinking glasses at the graduation party hit over 1 million views, captioned, "Imagine humiliating your own brother, then stealing his money. Wild." I watched silently as the comments piled up, some furious, others gleeful at the drama. "Lock them up. Family like this, I'd rather be an orphan. Protect Avery at all costs." Each comment was like a small stone laid on the foundation of my revenge. Meanwhile, my parents tried to control the fire. My mother gave a shaky interview to a local news station, insisting it was a family misunderstanding. But the footage of her walking into my apartment, caught on camera, played right beside her denial. The contrast was brutal. The anchor didn't even need to ask questions. The evidence mocked her in silence. At work, colleagues treated me differently. Where once there had been whispers of pity, now there was respect. My boss called me into his office, clapped a hand on my shoulder, and said, "I don't know how you're keeping so calm, Avery, but whatever happens, don't let them win." The pressure began to crush Alexis. They tried fighting back online, posting tearful videos about betrayal and toxic family members. But every time they spoke, users dug up another receipt, another designer purchase, another trip paid for from my account. One viral TikTok laid it out, step-by-step, money withdrawn on Monday, a handbag purchased on Tuesday, an Instagram post flaunting it on Wednesday. The timeline was damning. And then came the moment that sealed their fate. Someone leaked a private group chat. Yes, the same one I had seen in that anonymous email. This time the entire internet saw it. "Mom, Avery will cave. Always does. Dad, they're too weak to fight. Just push harder. Alexis, once we get the apartment, it's done. The screenshots spread like wildfire. Commentators tore them apart on podcasts. YouTubers uploaded hour-long breakdowns of the Avery case. My humiliation had transformed into their disgrace broadcast on every platform. I kept quiet. No statements, no interviews, no social media. Silence became my sharpest weapon. While they shouted, cried, and lied, I let the world watch. Each day, the tide of sympathy moved further toward me. Eleanor advised me to stay focused. The internet is loud, but the court is quiet, she said. Don't mistake one victory for the other. Still, the public storm worked in our favor. My parents stopped showing their faces in town. Alexis lost sponsorship deals, unfollowed by brands that once sent them free clothes. Invitations dried up, friends disappeared, and every attempt to spin the story only made it worse. One evening, scrolling through headlines, I found myself smiling for the first time in weeks. Not out of joy, but from the steady realization that I no longer carried the weight of shame. It had shifted entirely onto them. The internet had chosen its side, and it was mine. And soon the court would have to do the same. The courthouse loomed like a fortress of marble and glass. I walked up its steps with Eleanor at my side, the weight of months of betrayal pressing down on me. Reporters clustered near the entrance microphones, stretched out cameras flashing. I kept my gaze forward. I had no intention of giving sound bites. My answers would be delivered where it mattered before the judge. Inside the courtroom was colder than I expected. Wooden benches stretched back, polished, yet worn from years of conflict played out within those walls. Alexis sat at the opposite table, their suit too sharp, their expression too brittle. My parents flanked them, whispering, glancing at me as though I were some enemy stranger rather than their child. The proceedings began. Eleanor's voice cut through the air like steel, precise and unwavering. She laid out the timeline, the savings account drained, the unauthorized transfers, the break-in captured on camera. Each exhibit was projected onto a large screen, my own private humiliation made public evidence. But instead of shame, I felt relief. At last, the truth was no longer mine alone to carry. Alexis's lawyer tried to paint the theft as a misunderstanding, a family dispute blown out of proportion. They argued that joint accounts implied shared ownership, that emotions had clouded judgment. But the recordings dismantled every claim. The judge leaned forward as the footage played Alexis, waving my apartment key, my mother declaring, "You don't deserve this place. It belongs to us." No amount of legal gymnastics could erase those words. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly, my palms damp but steady. "Your Honor," I said, "this is not about money alone. It is about trust stripped bare. I contributed nearly $200,000 to a future that was stolen. They didn't just take my savings. They broke into my home, they mocked me, and they broadcast my humiliation to the world. I ask not only for restitution, but for recognition that this was theft, plain and deliberate." The courtroom was silent when I sat down. The judge's ruling came swift and clear. Alexis and my parents were found liable for conversion trespass and unjust enrichment. They were ordered to repay the full amount stolen, plus damages for the invasion of my property. The apartment was declared solely mine, free of any claim. The gavel struck final and undeniable. Alexis's face crumpled their bravado, collapsing in an instant. My parents stared straight ahead, stone-faced, but I could see the flush of shame on their necks. Outside, the reporters swarmed again, shouting questions. I walked past them without a word. My silence had spoken louder than any interview could. The judgment itself was enough. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the city lights flickering through the windows. A cashier's check lay on the table, payment, delivered by court order. But money felt secondary now. What mattered was that the law had seen me, had named the betrayal for what it was. I thought of Alexis, once the sibling I trusted, now a stranger, undone by greed. I thought of my parents who had chosen sides long before the courtroom, and I thought of myself not victorious, not vindictive, but free. For the first time in months, I slept without the weight of dread. Justice had been served. But closure, I knew, was something different. And that would come in its own time. The first Thanksgiving after the court ruling arrived colder than usual. The city streets were strung with lights, families hurrying home with grocery bags, turkeys, and pies tucked under their arms. For years, those sights had stirred something warm in me. This year, I felt only distance. I set my own table carefully. A single roasted chicken instead of a turkey, mashed potatoes, a pie from the corner bakery. The apartment was quiet, except for the faint hum of the heater. I ate slowly, the flavors simple, grounding. Each bite reminded me this was mine. All of it paid for, fought for, defended. No one could take it again. My phone buzzed throughout the evening. Messages from acquaintances I hadn't heard from in years, some congratulating me, others fishing for gossip. I let them pile up unanswered. Silence had become my companion, and I wasn't ready to trade it for empty chatter. Instead, I scrolled through the news. Alexis's name had all but vanished, from headlines replaced by newer scandals. Their social media accounts were private now, the designer bags and champagne flutes gone. My parents had retreated into obscurity, avoiding neighbors who whispered about the trial. The empire of shame they built had collapsed on itself. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the city skyline through the window. For months, humiliation had defined me, but as I watched the lights flicker in countless other homes, I realized humiliation had become fuel. Betrayal had been blueprint, and revenge had been survival. There is a lesson in that, though. I won't preach it. Life doesn't hand out fairness. Sometimes it strips you bare. But if you endure, if you hold your ground, you might find strength you never knew you had. Later that night, I opened my laptop and logged into an investment platform. The cashier's check from court was deposited, and I used it to purchase shares in a fintech startup I'd been studying for months. My future would not rest in fragile family bonds again. It would rest in decisions I made and risks I chose in walls I built for myself. As midnight neared, I poured a glass of wine, raised it to the empty room, and whispered, "Here's to freedom." I don't expect forgiveness from my family, nor do I intend to offer it. Some wounds aren't meant to be stitched, but I do expect peace, and at last I feel it settling around me. If you think my revenge was the right choice, comment right. And if you believe there was an even harsher way to handle betrayal, share it. I might use your idea for the next story.